Farmers and ranchers serve a critical role in conservation. They manage and install infrastructure necessary for the survival of endangered species. In this setting, there seems to be some activity in both the House and the Senate regarding the Endangered Species Act. Joining us now from the American Farm Bureau Federal Headquarters in Arizona's Farm Bureau President, Stefanie Smallhouse, joining us from Washington, D.C. Stefanie, thanks for taking the time to chat with us today. Can you tell us briefly why the act is getting some attention right now?
Well, thank you, Janet, for having me today. Well, the Endangered Species Act is somewhat outdated and ineffective. In 45 years, it has about a 1% success rate, and those species, a lot of them that have been removed, have been because of mistakes, and they shouldn't have been on the list in the first place. The Act has a very high economic cost and a very small environmental return, and so people in Congress are looking at that and looking at ways to modernize and update the Act to make it more effective.
Would you explain the role that farmers and ranchers, of course, play in the conservation of threatened and endangered species?
Well, about 60% of habitat for threatened and endangered species has been identified on private property, and that means that farmers and ranchers play an important role in the conservation practices that they implement and practice every day in recovering those species and helping them. And also just the mere presence of farms and ranches maintains open space, which is the most important part of the habitat element.
Now, Stefanie, I understand that you have a personal connection to this challenge. How are you impacted on your ranch located in southeastern Arizona?
Well, we've been farming and ranching in the same place for 130 years, and we have over 20 species which have been identified as threatened or endangered associated with our property in several layers of critical habitat. Now, I wish that made our property more valuable, but it doesn't. What it does is it restricts us and gives us more regulation in terms of what we can do and can't do in farming and ranching. I think that of all of those species, in fact, I know of all of those species, there is no scientific information available to ground truth and confirm the presence of those species or the habitat, which is unusual and doesn't make sense. But we have 4 fish included on that list and water as critical habitat that does not exist, and it never has. So it's just not fair, and the law is flawed in the way that it's implemented and enforced.
Are there any specific updates or fixes that you think are necessary to address the issue?
Well, there are a lot of discussions going on about ways to make it more effective. You know, going back to property impacts, there are ranchers in Arizona who are dealing with the Mexican wolf, and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year of their own money to avoid conflicts between cattle and wolves. And this just isn't fair, because as a society, you know, we want these animals to not go extinct, but should it be the burden of one family, of 5 ranching families in Arizona, to recover a species? I don't think so. So there are about 4 things that I'll just mention today. One is data. We need better scientific data when these decisions are being made. It's not just the best available data we need. We need that available data to be actually scientific. We need that data to be transparent. All of those decisions that have been made for our ranch with all of those 20 species, I don't have access to the information that where those decisions came from. That's not fair. I should be able to see that and say, yeah, that's correct information, or no, it's not. I mean, we've been there for 130 years. I think we know the environment. The other thing is that local governments like conservation districts and counties need to be much more involved in the decision-making process, because they know the land, the water, and the resources very well, and can be beneficial in the recovery of the species. And the last thing I'll bring up is just the fact that Fish and Wildlife Service needs more reasonable times. I mean, they get sued every day because they didn't accomplish something in 90 days or 180 days. It's just not reasonable. If we want to use good data to make these decisions, which have a great impact on people, we need to have more time to come to those decisions.
Well, Stefanie, thank you very much for your insight today. We certainly appreciate it. Arizona Farm Bureau President Stefanie Smallhouse joining us today from the American Farm Bureau Federation's headquarters.